Good afternoon. I'm Sally Rude from NGA Solutions, the Center for Best Practices at NGA. As you know, states promoting entrepreneurship is a promising way for those states to grow their regional economies. Governors, thank you, Claudia. Governors and their policy advisors are very interested in the strategy of supporting their entrepreneurial ecosystems. This includes governors' economic policy advisors, economic development appointees, and their advisors on education and workforce, and many others. NGA has held a number of meetings over time on this topic, and this includes experts roundtables, high-profile NGA Chairs Initiative events and reports, and sessions at the multi-day institutes for the governor's economic and workforce advisors. Earlier this year, NGA's annual meeting here in DC featured Arizona Governor Doug Ducey and North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper in an interesting session with one of our country's most prominent entrepreneurs, Steve Case. And I'll be happy to share a webcast of that conversation between Steve and the governors if you contact me afterwards. And earlier this summer, NGA released its report, Entrepreneurship and States, Fostering a Startup-Friendly Economy, pictured here, and available at the link shown here on the NGA website under NGA Solutions and then Publications. It was released June 26. The overall message from our events and publications over time has been that there are a number of things that governors and states can do to help develop networks and cultures of entrepreneurship in both the urban and rural areas of their states. So, what you'll be hearing about on this webinar, first we're going to hear about some current developments and unfolding events in DC and dynamic activities around the country. Then we'll hear from a couple of exemplary model states with regard to their policies and activities for entrepreneurship development. And finally, we'll hear how this all impacts entrepreneurs on the ground. At the end, we'll have time for questions from our state audience. Next slide, please. So now let me introduce our speakers. First, we have Jason Weens, Policy Director in Entrepreneurship for the Kauffman Foundation, where he leads the foundation's strategy to reduce barriers to entrepreneurship by improving public policy. Next, we'll hear from Anna Mason, who's partner in Revolution's Rise of the Rest Seed Fund. She leads the investment process for select deals in the fund across a variety of industries and also leads strategy and execution for the Rise of the Rest network and platform. And that includes the annual Rise of the Rest road trip and annual network summit. Anna's passion for this work is centered around two core beliefs. Investing in startups sits at the intersection of realism and optimism. And also, Rise of the Rest is a platform that helps us see the country through the eyes of entrepreneurs who are reimagining its future. Following Jason and Anna, we'll learn about some great programs in Colorado and in Tennessee. And to tell us about them, we welcome Dan Salvetti with the Colorado Governor's Office of Economic Development and International Trade, also well known as Colorado OEDIT, and Lindsay Cox, who is director of the 3686 Entrepreneurship Festival at the state organization called Launch Tennessee. And last, but certainly not least, we'll hear some remarks from Luana Russell, who chairs the Board of Directors for Small Business Majority, an advocacy and research group here in DC. Luana is an entrepreneur herself and heads a very successful government contracting firm here in the DC area. And I'm grateful to her for adding her important entrepreneur's perspective to our policy discussions. She's been a good friend to NGA in that regard. So at this time, I'm turning this over to Jason, and we're moving to his first slide. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, I think I've been unmuted. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jason.
Okay, great. Sorry to keep everyone in suspense. That wasn't for dramatic effect. We just had a little technical difficulty, but happy to be here and participate in this webinar. Sally, if you'll advance to the next slide, please. I wanted to start by first talking about Ewing Kauffman, the founder of the Kauffman Foundation. Mr. Kauffman was an entrepreneur. He started a business in the basement of his Kansas City home in 1950 with just $5,000. And like all entrepreneurs, Mr. Kauffman didn't know what the future held for him or for his company. But 15 years later, his business, which he named Marion Labs, went public. And in 1989, Marion Labs merged with Merrill Dow to become the 5th largest drug company in the country. That year, the business reported a net profit of $227 million and provided jobs for more than 3,400 people. And throughout all of the success that Mr. Kauffman had as an entrepreneur, one thing that he said about himself was that he was a common man who did uncommon things. Next slide, please. And I say that especially that part about being a common man who did uncommon things, because that's really how we approach entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation. Entrepreneurs are everyday Americans who take risks to turn ideas that they have into reality, whether that's a mom and pop restaurant owner or someone with a groundbreaking innovation. Entrepreneurs are the makers, doers, and dreamers in our country. They represent the best of America, and they exist in every state. We believe at Kauffman that entrepreneurship matters for a lot of reasons, but from just an economic standpoint, entrepreneurship matters because the new businesses that entrepreneurs create are responsible for nearly all of the net new jobs that are created in our country. Yet, entrepreneurship has become harder and rarer in most of America, with the rate of new entrepreneurs being essentially flat for the past 20 years. Next slide, please. So there are a number of reasons why we have entered into this period of entrepreneurship stagnation. And I don't intend to go into that full list, but I wanted to give you a little flavor for some of the things that we've seen that we believe contribute to the flat rates of entrepreneurship. And one of those factors is that entrepreneurs tend to be overlooked in policy conversations. Those who have more money and influence are often the ones who attract the attention of policymakers. And when entrepreneurs' perspective is not part of the conversation, what we often see is that when government does act to help American enterprise, support tends to be skewed toward established businesses, not scrappy and striving new business owners and entrepreneurs. You know, think for example of many government programs or even laws that have some phase-in based on the size of the business rather than the age of the business. Or think about the billions of dollars that are spent every year by cities and states to attract existing businesses to relocate to their jurisdiction, but how few dollars comparatively are spent on supporting new homegrown businesses. Next slide, please. So to address some of these challenges that we've seen in entrepreneurship, to raise awareness about the importance of entrepreneurs and build support for them, the Kauffman Foundation is creating what we're calling America's New Business Plan. And I'll give you today a little preview of this before we make it public in the coming weeks. America's New Business Plan is an agenda for supporting everyday Americans who are dreaming of starting their own businesses. We crafted this plan based on input from entrepreneurs, from people who champion entrepreneurs, including governors, state legislators, mayors, senators, and other leaders. And America's New Business Plan will offer specific steps to level the playing field for new businesses so that anyone who has an idea has access to the opportunity, the funding, the knowledge, and the support to turn it into a reality. As I said, we'll be making this agenda public in the coming weeks, as well as Start Us Up, which is what we're calling the coalition who will be supporting America's New Business Plan. Next slide, please. And so As I said, we, in America's New Business Plan, addressed 4 key themes that we heard over and over as we talked to entrepreneurs and people who work closely with them around what entrepreneurs need. And those are, opportunity. Entrepreneurs need a level playing field with established businesses, and they need government, where appropriate, to cut red tape that holds people back. Second, if anyone's ever had a conversation with an entrepreneur, you've likely heard about the challenges that entrepreneurs face in raising the money they need to start and grow their businesses. And so more needs to be done to make sure that all entrepreneurs have access to the right kind of capital they need, regardless of where they live in the country. Third, we know from many entrepreneurs that they enter often into entrepreneurship without a full understanding of all of the nuts and bolts that are required to be successful. And so we believe there's a role for government to play here in helping connect entrepreneurs to the people and resources they need to acquire the skills to be successful in their pursuit. And finally, entrepreneurs need support. There are very real financial concerns that many Americans face in their lives that often, unfortunately, limit risk-taking. So how can we address some of those things like student loan debt, retirement savings, healthcare, so that more Americans who have an idea and want to turn that into a business feel free and comfortable in taking that risk to do so. Next slide, please. So let me just leave you, before we go and hear from Anna, with just 4 ideas for things that governors can do now to help entrepreneurs. The first is to use the State of the State address and other public speeches to make increasing entrepreneurship a priority. Second, governors can appoint a Secretary of Entrepreneurship, and they can put this position in the cabinet to coordinate across all state agencies and with the private and nonprofit sectors to build strong ecosystems in the state. Third, governors can charge their economic development and unemployment insurance agencies with the goal of supporting entrepreneurship and making that a top priority. And finally, governors have the ability to conduct or request a statewide review of the impact that existing rules and regulations have on the creation of new businesses, and then where appropriate, work to eliminate or revise those laws so that there are fewer barriers standing in the way of entrepreneurs. I'll be happy at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Jason. Now we're going to hear from Anna Mason from Revolution's Rise of the Rest Fund.
Hi, Sally, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Anna.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Sally. And thanks so much, Jason. I was so excited to be part of the audience that got the sneak preview at Start Us Up. I'm really excited to see where that goes. I'm grateful to you all for joining this call and really looking forward to sharing a little bit more about Rise of the Rest. That is not me on that first slide, but hopefully is a person who is familiar to many of you, Steve Case, who is the chairman and CEO of Revolution, and really the visionary behind the work that we do here at Revolution around Rise of the Rest. For us, while we play the role of traditional venture capital firm and investor, when you think about where different players fit within the landscape, I think one of the many reasons why this topic is so near and dear to me is that I have often thought of Rise of the Rest actually as a bit of a startup in and of itself that really exists inside of Revolution, our Washington, D.C. based venture capital firm that has $1.5 billion in assets under management across a family of 3 funds, where we are deploying that capital and investing in startups all across the country. And I say that because we today are represented as a fund, but really, Rise of the Rest in many ways started as an idea and grew into a movement, transformed into a platform centered around these tours that we do, and ultimately, finally 7 years in, transitioned into an investment fund. So it's a first person, I think, daily reminder of how long, the long game that is inherent in entrepreneurship and business building. And I think it's one of the many reasons why we are so grateful to partner with and invest in and support entrepreneurs all across the country. Sally, can you advance the next slide, please? So for a little bit more background, what's really core to the Rise of the Rest thesis, and this is very simpatico with Jason's earlier remarks on behalf of Kaufman about the importance of leveling the playing field. That really is the core value of Rise of the Rest, both on the platform side and on our fund side. And if you ever hear any of us talk about the work that we do and the importance of investing in entrepreneurs all across the country, we will always point back to, I think, one core driving data point for us, which is that 75% of the capital that gets invested into venture-backed startups every year is concentrated in just 3 states across the country: California, New York, and Massachusetts. This past year, it was about $100 billion that went into venture-backed companies. So there really is a disparity right now where many brilliant entrepreneurs and innovators who are working on building truly transformative businesses all across the country just can't get a fair shake because they can't get that access to capital. So that's really our North Star, and we've been so grateful to partner with so many cities and so many states all across the country through the work that we've done both on the platform side with our tours and also on the fund side through our investments. So this slide here represents just a little bit of the history. Dates back to 2011 with the Start of America partnership. And, we are excited as we, fast forward now to 2019, where we have over 100 investments across the country. We most recently were able to announce the first unicorn or startup with $1 billion plus valuation in the Rise of the Rest portfolio, a Detroit-based company called StockX. And I think, what's important there is that I think for us, entrepreneurship comes in many shapes and forms. We support entrepreneurship of all shapes and sizes, in particular through the work that we do on our tours. But when you think about the magnitude and the impact that venture-backable startups can have, they really can become these just incredibly high growth economic drivers for cities and for states, employing hundreds, if not thousands of people, and really delivering a lot of value. And for us, investing at an early stage into these companies all across the country is critical because we want to invest in and see manifest that transformation to high growth, large scale businesses and many of the businesses of the future in cities all across the country. So we start to have more of that equal distribution of startup driven growth. Sally, can you move to the next slide, please? So this is just a very quick snapshot of what our fund looks like. We have a $150 million fund that invests at the early stage up to $1 million on our first check into companies located all across the country, but are headquartered outside of Silicon Valley, New York City, or Boston. And I share this slide with pride because I'm incredibly encouraged by the work that our team does to have a diversified portfolio that cuts across so many states in every region in the country. There's been a lot of attention paid, rightfully so, to the Midwest, the Heartland, and we are proud to have just over a quarter of our portfolio invested there. But of equal import is the fact that I think we are finding tremendous high potential companies in regions all across the country. Next slide, please, Sally. And so I wanted to take a minute to actually talk about the way that our fund has evolved to support portfolio companies. And this ties back to a comment that Jason made in his remarks about the support for entrepreneurs is not just about funding, though that's a critical piece of it and oftentimes what people talk about the most, but it was, I think Jason said, a combination of opportunity, funding, knowledge, and support. And a trend to watch for in the venture space and the venture capital community is the emergence and pretty rapid growth of support platforms. So we used to see this a lot more prevalent, and of course still do see it very prevalent at very early stage, pre-venture stage investments in what's known as the accelerator and incubator community that offer a lot of support resources to the earliest stage companies as they're in sort of ideation and original company formation stage. But increasingly, venture funds like ours are shifting gears to start really investing a lot more in not just the capital that they put into companies, but the support services that go with it. And in particular, as we think about the entrepreneurs that we're backing and the companies that we're backing all across the country, we know that it's not just about the money, but it's about the expertise, the education, the community that we can help bring to bear. And so we really try to leverage some of these economies of scale and this network that we've built all across the country to support the companies in that effort. And while you'll see a lot on this page that is very much so private sector focused in terms of the partnerships that we work towards, I think there's a tremendous white space here for public sector partnership. And I'll chat about that a little bit more at the end. Next slide, please, Sally. So this is just a very quick snapshot from our most recent tour, the 8th Rise the Rest tour this past May, which took us through 4 regions in Florida and then Puerto Rico. And so I wanted to just share this slide as a quick refresher. I think many folks who are familiar with the Rise of the Rest are most acquainted with the bus tour and perhaps not with the fund. So I just wanted to very briefly share how the tour connects to the fund. So once a year, we do a 5-city, 5-day road trip. It's 12 hours of programming a day. It's 60 hours of cumulative programming where we engage approximately 4,000 people, combination of public and private sector. And, I think leaders from, many of your offices or your colleagues' offices all across the country. And for us, this is really about getting to know a community in what we hope is a very organic and 360 way. So what people see is this 5-city, 5-day experience. What many don't see is a 6-month planning process that our team undergoes and works in close partnership and coordination with a robust planning committee in each host city. And this really helps us to understand, I think, the different levers that push and pull both opportunities and obstacles that entrepreneurs and startups and just the broader innovation economy and landscape face in all of these cities. Next slide, please. And so I would encourage all of you to visit revolution.com and under the Rise the Rest tab, check out our playbook. The first playbook that we released in 2018 was really a look at some of our learnings from the road and anecdotal insights from many of our partners from across the more than 40 cities that we visited on Rise of the Rest tours. And it really synthesizes how different components of an ecosystem and of a community all really fit together to support innovation and entrepreneurship. So it's not just investors or startup support groups, but there really is a powerful role that all of these different spokes within the Startup Hub can play. Next slide, please. And so just a very quick teaser, I'm really excited to be launching our second playbook, which will be out this fall. Whereas our first playbook looked at how different types of people and organizations can influence startup communities and help to drive what we think of as network density. This next playbook is actually going to take a look at some physical developments and how different models that we've seen and experienced across the country really can contribute and be important drivers to the innovation economy. Next slide, please. And so in closing, I just wanted to share a quick snapshot of a couple of our companies. Again, we have more than 125 from across the country, but a theme that I'm pretty excited about as I think about some different companies within our portfolio is a very high growth cohort of companies that cut across industries, whether it be logistics, warehousing, healthcare, auto industry, hospitality, all of whom are represented on this slide here. They start in a regional market, often what might be thought of as a secondary or tertiary city, but really have that core industry expertise that they've built up as a direct result of the city that they operate in. And once they've really gotten that right, what we call product market fit down, they then start to grow, and oftentimes pretty rapidly, through a market-based expansion. So they say, what are the next 5 cities we can go to, the next 20 cities, 30 cities, et cetera. And what's so interesting to me about this is that there has been, I think, an important focus, and one that we're all focused on how do you support the companies in your own backyard to get off the ground and support those entrepreneurs and help them launch their businesses. But what I think is equally critical, and that should be an important part of this next level of the conversation we all have together, is how cities and states can also, and their governments can also think about supporting other high growth startups from other cities and other states who want to expand into that region, whether it's a market-facing business that can help to meaningfully drive utilization in other core legacy industries in the city or state, or want to open second or third offices and contribute to the economic output of the city or state in that way. And so I think there's a really great opportunity for many of us on the call and the states represented to start to connect the dots between one another to support these startups that are already at an accelerated growth phase. So I look forward to chatting about this and other topics more at the end of the call and as a follow-up in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you, Anna. Terrific information. Next, we're going to hear from Dan Salvetti from Colorado. Dan, are you on the line?
Yes, Sally, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So I just wanted to start off by thanking Sally and the NGA for allowing us the opportunity to speak on this webinar and for highlighting our work in the entrepreneurship reports. We're very proud of the work we're doing here, so it's really nice when others pick it up and think it's worthwhile as well. So to go through the slides, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about our office and sort of our approach to economic development. Then I'm going to talk about the results of the newest startup community survey that we've done in 2018. It's actually the 4th year running, and we should be launching one soon for 2019. And then I will talk about how we got to those results and how we plan to use them. So just a little background on the office. Colorado's Office of Economic Development and International Trade is part of the Governor's Cabinet, and we like to refer to it as OEDIT because it's a lot shorter to say and a lot easier to say. So OEDIT has 14 different divisions spanning from film and television to advanced industries accelerators, to creative industries, to my unit, which is the Global Business Development unit. And within Global Business Development, we have strategy and analytics. And our team, Global Business Development, is pretty small. It's about 10, it's 10 of us here. And our mission is to go out and engage with companies and try to convince them, especially on a global scale, to come to Colorado if they're considering expansion. So with only 10 people and only 2 of them sort of on the outreach section, we have to focus our efforts a lot so that we're not wasting our time. We don't have a lot of resources to just throw at the problem. So we've taken a very data-heavy approach to our efforts, and we put a lot of emphasis on our annual strategies, which sort of show us which markets we should be engaging with in the U.S. and across the globe. It also shows us what messaging we should be putting forward to have the best impact when we're there. So if you go to the next slide, please, Sally. So the Startup Community Survey is sort of one of our tools that we use to make those strategies happen. And right here we have the results from the 2018 one. You can see in sort of the light blue is what we call our benefits of locating or starting up a company in Colorado as an entrepreneur. The darker blue is our reputation in Colorado as a startup destination. And the red is the cost or the challenges that you might face because of starting up in Colorado. And as you can see here, we've sort of made a lot of advancements for both our benefits and reputations over the last between 2017 and this year. So 2017 are those black bars, and then 2016 are the light gray bars there. And what you're looking at with the 6.3, 5.8, these are our average respondent scores of how they ranked from 1 to 10 on those specific items. So if you look in the upper left, network for startups, you know, survey respondents were asked to rank how they viewed that benefit in Colorado. And so in 2017, we had a 5.8 average ranking there, and this year we had a 6.3. So we improved a little bit, but it also looks like we're still lower in most metrics than, excuse me, than we were in 2016. We can also see on the cost side that it looks like we may be facing more challenges than we used to. So a lower score on the cost would mean that it's a little more challenging now than it was at a higher ranking at that point. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but we are improving. And as you can see, the benefits and the reputation makes up about 80% of an entrepreneur's satisfaction with the Colorado market. So, and most of that, over half, is the benefits. So if you go to the next slide, Sally, please. So how do we come up with these numbers? Basically, we went to different communities within Colorado and had focus groups with business leaders in the entrepreneurial community and asked them to sort of brainstorm their what they thought was the benefits, how they saw the reputation of Colorado, and what they saw as the challenges within Colorado for entrepreneurs. And we did several, I think 10 of these focus groups. And what we did was we came back and made a survey on it, trying very hard not to lead any questions. So a large part of the survey portion is to make sure that the way you're asking the questions do not lead respondents into a particular answer, because you want the most honest answer, you want the most representative answer of what the community is thinking. So what we found when we did our focus groups is that generally people in Colorado thought of the networks, so the knowledge and experience of other entrepreneurs was a large benefit for entrepreneurs in Colorado. Sort of the availability of talent, access to capital, local atmosphere, and institutions were important benefits that the entrepreneurial community identified for Colorado. And then as far as reputation goes, we started to see that they thought we had a very dense sort of critical mass of entrepreneurs. Success and exits were very important. The supportiveness of business community and cohesive image. And then on the cost side, we saw that cost of capital, cost of employee acquisition is a little bit challenging in Colorado. government-related costs are things that are really thought about a lot from the entrepreneur side. And then personal costs. So we've been having massive growth along the Front Range here, and with that has come sort of increased cost of housing, cost of living, stuff like that. So we sent out these surveys, and we had, I think in 2018, we had about 225 respondents from across Colorado, and their location was, and sort of their demographic distribution was similar to what you'd expect looking at the demographics of Colorado as a whole. When we got the survey results back, we ran regressions on each of these networks, availability of talent, access to capital, all these characteristics onto their category, so onto benefits. And then we did the same for density, success and exits, supportive business community, and cohesive image onto reputation, and the same with the costs onto the total cost category. So those categorical rankings, we said, basically, how would you rank Colorado on its benefits as a entrepreneur's location? And then we took those categorical rankings and we regressed them on a couple of different sort of overarching questions, which were, would you locate here again if you had the option? And another one was, would you recommend this as a place of starting up a business? And so once we got those regressions, we used a couple of different equations to give them what we call importance weights, which basically shows how they affect the entrepreneur's overarching idea of Colorado as a satisfactory place to run this business. And so we use all this information to, one, advise local communities on where we see the weaknesses that they could be targeting to help grow this community. And we also do this at the state level as well, so helping to inform policy decisions. But also we use it when we are doing our outreach and retention efforts. We run similar surveys that may tell us what businesses are looking for when they're selecting a specific site over another. And so we could see where, let's say, we have really strong scores for the startup community survey, and where startup community is, or there's some aspect of a startup community that is important for site selectors, then we know that we need to highlight that in our outward materials that we're using to market the state. So that was just a brief overview of what we've done here, and I'm looking forward to answer any questions that anyone has at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Now let's move on quickly to Lindsay in Tennessee.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Slide. Advance the slide. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Cox. I'm the Director of Operations, Government Relations, and 3686 here at Launch Tennessee. Thank you to the NGA for having me today, and I do apologize. I have a bit of a cold, so if you hear any sniffles, just please ignore them, and I will try to keep them at a minimum. Next slide, please. So just a brief kind of history of Launch Tennessee. We've been around since 2012. We were born out of then Governor Bill Haslam's Jobs for Tennessee initiative. So one of those major brackets was around entrepreneurship and supporting startups. What we are perhaps best known for and what we really identify as our competitive advantage is that we are one of the very few states with a distributed entrepreneurship network across our state. So we actually have 6 regional entrepreneur centers that are located in both urban and rural areas, as well as 3 additional network partners, which are focused in specific industries, and those are life science, advanced energies, and then we also partner with Bunker Lab supporting veteran entrepreneurship. So you can just see that map briefly. So these regional entrepreneur centers really are the front door for the region, so any entrepreneur can walk in and get connected with resources. It also serves to be very helpful. So if we have an entrepreneur that comes in the door in Memphis that is perhaps a music startup, we can connect them with mentors in Nashville who may have more experience in the industry. And so the network really does lean on each other and feed on each other to be very successful. Next slide. So here at Launch Tennessee, we really focus on 5 strategic areas. The first of which is capital, and that is both traditional and non-traditional. I'll go into a bit more detail the current capital initiatives that we're running at launch towards the end. Market access for us is connecting startups with potential corporate customers. Commercialization, just getting technologies out of research institutions and into tangible products. Talent, we support talent at the high school level, the adult level. We also run a great internship program here at Launch that places interns within startups throughout the summer, and we will be expanding that program as we go into this fiscal year. And then environment, which for us means ensuring that Tennessee isn't just a very business-friendly state, but we're also a startup-friendly state. Next slide. So these are just some kind of brief metrics, results by the numbers. They are 2018 numbers. I won't read through them, but you can kind of check out and see all the ways that Launch Tennessee has performed well over our tenured history, including being the second highest state in the Southeast as far as increase in capital. We would have been first, but Florida had one company that was a unicorn, so they beat us out, but we're still very proud of that number. Next slide. So this is how we think about serving startups. So we really touch all the way from ideation to portfolio. The programs that you see listed are just some of our offerings at Launch Tennessee, and they include everything from university courses and student engagement at that early end to an angel tax credit, which we administer on behalf of the state, which provides 30% back on your Hall income tax if you invest in an early stage company, to SBIR micro grants, so also supporting those initiatives through portfolio, which for us are really our larger capital programs. Next slide. So recent successes that I'll touch on. Last year, we were able to successfully double our SBIR matching fund, which is, for those not familiar, SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, is a federal grant program. And so our state has a matching fund that had been funded at $1.5 million for the last 2 years. Last legislative session, we were successful in seeing that budget increase to $3 million. I'm very excited to say that once those funds leave the door this year, we will have funded around 50 startups commercializing technology with that in grand total $6 million, something that we're very proud of, and we're very excited to see the success of those companies. The Discover Entrepreneurship Program is a new initiative we are launching this year, which provides curriculum for high school teachers to teach within the classroom. We did the training for that this summer, and so that will be deployed in some of our more rural communities over this next semester. So again, introducing entrepreneurship at a young age. We did receive an I-6 grant, which will help expand our mentor network program. So currently we focus on 2 industries, life science and advanced energy. And with that I-6, we will also be adding agriculture and auto to that mix, which are industries that our state performs really well in. The internship program will be expanding from around 30 summer interns to 100 over the course of the full year. And then something I'm very excited about is our innovation capital continuum. So some of you may be familiar with the SSBCI federal program, State Small Business Tax Credit Initiative, somewhere in there. Our state decided to structure that as a $30 million co-investment fund, which we at Launch Tennessee administered. We are now seeing returns off of that program, which are being recycled into our innovation capital continuum. And what that is allowing us to do is provide follow-on funding for companies in need that came through that first program, structure an impact fund, which writes checks from $50,000 to $150,000 and does require co-investment. And then the blended capital fund, which are convertible notes in the $25,000 to $50,000 range, and are really intended for founders from more underrepresented backgrounds that are missing that friends and family round. So we're excited to be the place that can potentially provide that to them. Next slide. And then I would be remiss as the director of this event if I did not talk about it. So we are gearing up for 3686. It is next week here in Nashville, the 28th and 29th. This will be year 7 for us, and we've now grown into the largest investor entrepreneur conference in the Southeast. So we will have 1,200 folks in town, just over 190 investors for 2 days of workshops, panels, fireside chats. We've just confirmed the head of Apple's AI team to speak. Seth Bernstein of Alliance Bernstein will also be in attendance, as well as 35 additional programming pieces. So if you've always wanted to come to Nashville, feel free to hop on a plane and see me next week.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And now we're linking in Luana.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can now. Thank you, Luana.
Thank you. In advance to the next slide, please. Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to spend this last few minutes with you. This has been such a great conversation so far, and I'm so excited to, 1, be a part of the conversation, and 2, to just be an entrepreneur in the States, because there's so much going on. It's really wonderful. So it's interesting for me, as Sally mentioned, I have like 2 hats. So one side, I am chair of the board for the Small Business Majority, and the Small Business Majority has a mission to empower entrepreneurs. We are looking at building a thriving and inclusive economy, and we do this via programming across different states. And so we work with different states to help them enhance their entrepreneurial presence and assist in small business support across the states in many levels. And then on the flip side of that, my other hat is that I'm an entrepreneur, and I started my business back in 2005, and we're a management consulting firm, and we have about 90 employees, and we cross about 15 states. So it's always interesting for me to hear what's happening from state to state, because we have employees from California to Utah to Colorado to New York, of course, to DC, and every state does operate differently. And so I'm always excited to hear, well, what's going on over here versus there, and would love for some of those things to converge. Next slide, please. So I think we've talked about this a lot during this call, but why support entrepreneurism? We've talked a lot in terms of other data, but from the surveys that we have conducted as part of the Small Business Majority, you can see that we are the ones creating the jobs, right? You can see that we all start new businesses. Look at the number of women-owned businesses, the number of minority-owned businesses, the number of immigrants who started businesses despite being a smaller part of the population. It is a wonderful avenue for many individuals, and following on to that awesome line from Jason, common people doing uncommon things and having an idea and just running out there and figuring out the way to get it done. And we definitely support the American economy in a big way, and have such an impact on individual lives. And we are very fortunate that we can see the lives and the impact that we're making as we are developing our companies. Next slide, please. So, Small Business Majority does do a lot of surveys to get a better understanding and a pulse for entrepreneurs across multiple states. And so here are some of the real barriers to maintaining and growing businesses, and probably not too surprising to anyone. There are things that I think we hear often when we're looking at developing programs. Taxes is always a big one. We need more tax incentives for businesses. The healthcare costs, again, always big issues for small businesses and entrepreneurs as they're trying to figure it out. Licensing and regulation, I can tell you firsthand, that's huge because, again, working across 15 states, we have to register pretty much and start a foreign-owned business practically in that state. And so they're different. And so working through all of those issues are, navigating those issues are a big deal. And availability of capital, again, is always something that is confronting the entrepreneur and the small business owner as we start to develop. Next slide, please. So I thought that the best thing that I could add to this conversation would be putting on my two hats, the entrepreneurial hat and then the small business majority hat, to say, well, if I'm a state that is trying to figure out this massive maze and understand how can we do more, how can we help entrepreneurs in our state to grow and thrive. And so I jotted a few ideas and we'll just touch on them briefly. Data. Colorado, hands off, like hats off. That's so awesome in terms of gathering that data and understanding where you are. How much can you say for other states? How much do you really know about the entrepreneurial population in your state? How much do you really know about what their needs are and how your state and the regulations and policies within your state either enhance or impede an individual's ability to become an entrepreneur? Have you had those conversations? And you might be surprised at the results, right? You might not know that you are impeding an entrepreneur's growth when you think you might be enhancing it. And speaking of those conversations, start that conversation yourself versus waiting for folks to come to you and ask for help or support. Be proactive in terms of looking at entrepreneurship and knowing that entrepreneurship is a very, very, very viable economic opportunity for every single state. Because when you understand your assets, the next bullet, then you know what you have to offer an entrepreneur, and you'd be surprised that even from the commercialization perspective, and the industries that are closet industries in your state, an entrepreneur with a great idea can just blow through that. We've done some work with a federal agency that has a lot of labs, and it's amazing to see we talk about the mad scientists in those labs, and they create these patents, and then the patents are just sitting there waiting for commercialization. Well, just think if you had some kind of a program in your state where you are educating your entrepreneurs on those programs that exist or the patents that exist and how you can help them capitalize and commercialize those patents and start those businesses. That's an awesome thing and something that you can start pretty much from the ground up because all the information exists somewhere. And then the last thing I would say from the state perspective is understanding your process. Yeah, again, working across 15 states, woo! I can tell you every state is different, and some states are really, really tough to work in if you're a large business or a small business. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's just really difficult. As soon as a new business is registered, do you reach out to them? Do you say, wow, I noticed that you just incorporated your business right here in the lovely state of XYZ, and we want to help you understand this red tape and give you some support before you're getting into trouble, before someone calls you and say, hey, do you know that you didn't do X, which happens every day, happens to us. You know, we think that we're being proactive and we know how to navigate states because we've done it a million times, but it never fails me that when we're starting up in a new state, sometimes we'll get that call of, hey, did you know that you needed to do X? And it's like, well, no, we followed all your processes online and we thought we had it together, but now here we are with that call, and now we have to reactively go back and fix something or change something. And even better, some states want to give us a fine for not doing what we didn't even know that we needed to do. So understanding your processes and reaching out to the entrepreneur to help them as soon as they start to have that jump start and feel as though you are really supportive and wanting to support their growth and knowing how important that growth is going to be to your state overall. Next slide, please. And then lastly, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't give some tips for entrepreneurs, even though I don't know how many are on the line. But I always tell entrepreneurs that I work with and that I have the opportunity to mentor to be very, very vocal and ask a lot of questions. And sometimes we are so focused on just getting the thing done and getting our business off the ground that we're not thinking about the bigger picture and the long-term picture. And that's one of the reasons why I started working with the small business majority so many years ago, and that I realized that, wow, advocacy is huge. Advocacy is so, so important. And I don't think entrepreneurs understand how important it is. I don't think that many realize that, you know, people are actually listening. So when you go and you're speaking with your leadership, they're actually listening to what you have to say, and they want to get that information from you. They want your perspective, from the large business to the small business to the solopreneur who's just starting. They really do want to hear you and want your participation. And then again, from that entrepreneurial perspective, let's not always go to the leader with, hey, I got a problem. Let's go to the leader with, hey, I got a solution to something that has occurred. You know, this has happened to me. Maybe we can look at it this way. Can I help you resolve that issue so that you will not have this kind of situation with another entrepreneur in the future? So thank you again so much, Sally, for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts and to participate with this great panel. I'll just turn it right back over to you.
Thank you, Luana, and thank you, Jason, Anna, Dan, Lindsay, and Luana, all of you. Wonderful presentations. I'm just going to quickly display this link again for the NGA Entrepreneurship Report. And to give you a flavor for what's covered in it, here's a shot of the contents, pretty comprehensive, and a few of the states mentioned. And as you can see, a lot of approaches and a number of states are highlighted in the report, so I'd urge you to go to that download site on the NGA website. So while the audience is thinking of questions, let's go ahead and display the speaker's contact information so that you can have that in your hip pockets. So you can send us questions either one of two ways, either by emailing us through the Zoom control panel on your screens or by raising your hand via the Zoom control panel. And when you do this option, we'll unmute you so you can ask your question yourself. It'd be great if you identify yourselves and mention what state you're from, but also you're welcome to ask questions anonymously. So while we're waiting for some questions, I'm going to direct a question back, circle back to Jason, and ask him, what is one state-specific recommendation that out of the ones that you mentioned that you might want to elaborate on for a minute from America's New Business Plan?
Sally, thanks for asking the question. So one of the ideas that we will be proposing in America's New Business Plan is based off something that was done in Washington, D.C. Some time ago to address unfunded mandates, which I'm sure states are familiar with. And so what we're proposing is that at all levels of government, a process be put in place where anytime there would be a proposed change to regulation or a new bill that's being considered in the legislature, that some analysis be done to determine in advance what the effect of that proposed policy change would be for new businesses. You know, I talked about governors using their power now to conduct a review of existing rules and regulations that impact new businesses. That's critically important, but moving forward, how do we ensure that the perspective of the entrepreneur, the new business owner, is considered and known by policymakers in advance of making decisions? And so we're calling for an entrepreneur impact statement and for states to pursue this as just one of the ideas.
Thank you, Jason. So we do have a question for, in addition, for Luana. Luana, you mentioned that small business owners should be vocal and should be reaching out to elected officials with the problems and solutions that they have. What would you recommend as a few first steps to get the ball rolling on that? Can you unmute Luana?
Oh, there we go. Oh, that's such an awesome question. I would say, so first I'm going to turn the individual over to the small business majority because that's what we do on a daily basis. We work with individuals across states to get them involved and active within their state with that state legislator all the way from the local all the way up to the state side. And we also work very closely with the individual entrepreneurs to help them understand how to work with media, even as you're going through that process. And we get everyone prepared from that perspective because, you know, all states are different, right? And so some of the issues that you'll experience in one state, you might not experience in another. And it's great that we have this small business committee where we meet monthly and talk about some of the issues that are impacting all of us as small business owners and entrepreneurs, but then how one state deals with it versus another. And then we'll mobilize and actually start helping those individuals within the state work with their leadership so that, you know, we'll take those visits to speak with them and set up those appointments to have meetings.
Thank you, Luana. So this is Sally again. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and sort of summarize a couple of things here. We're getting lots of requests for 1, the link to the NGA report, 2, the recording, and 3, the slides. And we really appreciate everybody's interest. So just so you'll know, we are recording this and it will be posted to the NGA website, the slides and the recording, and I'll send out a message to my contacts, Governor's Economic Policy Advisors, so they can spread that around further to their additional folks in their states. And then there are a couple of questions about the Colorado survey, how they collect their more detailed and rigorous questions about how they collect their data and whether there's anything available for public viewing on that, and how they administer the survey. and where their lists come from. So rather than go into those sorts of more detailed questions and answers on this recording, I will put that person in touch with the Colorado folks, and happy to do that. And I think at this point, since we are over our time, we'll go ahead and sign off on this webinar. But I see that there's a lot of interest out there, and we definitely will try to follow up with each of you on your very specific questions and points. Thank you again to our wonderful speakers. And I also want to take a moment just to thank very much the UN Marion Kaufman Foundation for its helpful support of NGA and helping us to further state entrepreneurship strategy, and particularly to Jason Weens for working with us on that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we're going to sign off now.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.